Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Sunday Nights Unlock the Middle, where we pride ourselves on finding everything that's great about middle-level education and education in general. My name is Dean Packard. I'm the principal of Charlton Middle School, and alongside of me, I have my good friend and co-host, Principal Chris Starcheski of the Fighting Titans of Dudley Middle School. During tonight's show, we'll be streaming live on YouTube, Twitter, Periscope, and what other one, Chris? Facebook. That's right. Thank you very much. All four areas will be streaming live. If you have any comments you'd like to say during our show, please chime in. We'd love to make that part of our show. And if you're watching out there, we would love to have you tell us who you are and where you're watching from. Let me kick this over to my co-host and good friend, Principal Chris Starcheski. Chris, how are you tonight?
Dean, I'm amazing. I started out the morning with an AAU baseball practice with 12 kids who are hungry to get better. I love that I was wearing the shirt about you only get this day once. Make it a great one by our good friend and colleague who passed away, John Pear, great principal at Dudley Middle School. He gave a lot of great advice to us, but I'm looking to pass that on to our kids, our families, anybody that we contact, because it's smart advice. But anyway, I started out the day with that AAU baseball practice. And, one of the things I was thinking about, Dean, because these kids are all 10, 9, 11 years old, they require a good amount of structure. They require a good amount of play. But at the end of each day, they need to reflect back on it and understand that they gave the best effort they possibly could give. And I was pretty excited at the end of that practice because it's a great tie into our show tonight about student behaviors.
Well, we're going to be talking with Paul O'Neill, who's, I found out, one of the best in the business, and his track record will speak for himself. Innovative, transformative with his ideas. We said as middle school principals, Chris, and it's our job all the time to ensure that we try to be as creative as we possibly can with students. Discipline shouldn't be punishment. Discipline should be an opportunity to learn. And you remember, if you start thinking about cognitive development between 10 and 14, well, guess what? They make mistakes, and you learn from making mistakes. So again, we're going to have this dance tonight that's really going to bring us into some sort of new thought process, which I'm really excited about. Hey, and I just want to give a quick shout out to our leadership, Navigating Leadership on Friday. We had a great group, and Dr. White, we had Principal Rob, and we had Terry. We had from Test middle school, intermediate school, and Carrie was fantastic, and they were all great, and we all navigated through what I would consider COVID-19 doldrums, and and it was kind of nice to be able to sit there and commiserate together.
Absolutely right. And earlier today, extending on that, I saw a great quote by Carol Dweck about failure and making mistakes. I retweeted it a little while ago, and it was about every time a child makes a mistake, there's a new brain synapse that's created. There's a new connection that's created, and it's okay to embrace mistakes. And as we talk about student discipline and student behaviors, we want to acknowledge the idea that in order to get better, we've got to fall down. We've got to avoid perfection. We've got to embrace the mistake. And that is what middle school is about. It's a time to make safe mistakes and safe errors that aren't going to be a part of that permanent record. So what do you say we bring Paul in and get this rolling?
Yeah, let me get him in here. You do the bio, and I'll tell you what. Let's do this up right. Let's get this party started in Paul's words. Okay, let's go.
Awesome. Well, hey, Mr. Paul O'Neill's been an educational leader since 1994. I think we were born in the same year, Paul. 72. During the course of his career, he has served in a variety of capacities. He's been a department supervisor, a dean, a classroom teacher. He's a mentor and a coach, a club advisor. A move from Florida to New Jersey. There's that state again, Dean. Has enabled him.
New Jersey showering us with talented people.
Yes, man. He's been able to build several academic and co-curricular programs. In September of 2016, Mr. O'Neill transitioned to the role of world language and special education supervisor, grades 5 through 12, in his district. Mr. O'Neill currently serves as supervisor of instruction at Mill Pond Elementary in Lacey Township, New Jersey. Mr. O'Neill is a member of the NJDOE Statewide Professional Learning Committee, the NJPSA Nominating Committee, and has been a producer of several ed camps. Love ed camps, by the way, Paul. I absolutely love them throughout the state of New Jersey. His work also includes regional affiliations with hashtag United We Learn, which is a group of educators whose focus is the promotion of equity in our schools. Hashtag LMAP Network, which collaborates daily to connect and reflect regarding operational practices and protocol at the elementary level, as well as the NJED Think Tank and the NJ Autism Tank. Paul, how the heck are you tonight?
Oh my goodness, you got to be kidding me. Listen, after that intro and you guys talking about behavior, you got me amped. I'm on Unlock the Middle. Unlock the Middle. Who's got it better than me right now?
Hey, we left something out in that intro, though. We found out something else about you in the pregame warm-up, the DJ for weddings. Okay, that's where the energy comes from, man.
Right.
That sits right in the middle of that resume, man. Welcome to our show. We're honored to have you here today, and we're honored to be able to talk to you about something that's near and dear to us, because we're all about pointing kids in the right direction. So I'm going to kick this over to Chris, and Chris is going to get this party started.
All right.
Hey, Paul, one of the biggest issues about behavior is that it tells a story. It's a communication tool. Behavior represents things that are or are not happening in the life of the student. Can you talk about that from the educator's perspective in terms of some cues and some thinking that we should have relative to student behaviors?
No doubt, no doubt. So behavior is communication, like you said, it's the message. But I think one misconception or one mistake that's made oftentimes is we're looking for that message to be verbal, and we're looking for that message to be given in an appropriate fashion. But we've got to realize that the students that we deal with, they may not have the words at that moment to either deliver the message or to deliver it appropriately. So we've got to work through that. It's like a puzzle. We've got to work through those messages that we're receiving. And then what if those messages are nonverbal? What do we do then? We got to dig deeper into our bag of tricks to find out. And you made this great point, what's happening in someone's life or what's not happening in someone's life. Because we can't always assume that something bad is going on in someone's life. It just might be something's missing in someone's life.
And that ends up being the antecedent. You're absolutely correct. And that's an interesting part when you start looking at it. And, as we migrate into the second topic and hurt people. And what that means is if they're carrying that anger, let's dig into that a little bit, because that becomes that antecedent for the delivery of the message that they deliver on to others.
Absolutely. And I think with hurt people, where I remember that story most is a student I had very early in my career, 1995. I had a student who would get into this cycle of anger, this cycle of rage, where he just had a lot of struggle controlling what was coming out of his mouth and how he was reacting to things. And we've got to realize that that's a piece of it too, that's a defense mechanism sometimes, and people get into these moments where they have difficulty bringing it back. So this student that I had said, he said to me, I get so angry at things and people, and then I don't know how to get out of it, and I end up getting angry at myself. So that cycle just continues to perpetuate, and the snowball's rolling downhill. It's getting bigger and bigger as we go. So we've got to realize that when that person's hurt and they're saying those hurtful things, we've got to get them to a place where they're not hurting as much, because that's not the time for redirection. That's not the time for sending the message when someone's hurt. We've got to have them become less hurt so that they're more receptive to the message.
So what are some tactics? What do you do when a child gets to that level? I mean, you work in this stuff all the time. So what type of strategies would you use to de-escalate the moments to be able to bring in a teachable moment?
Well, it's pre-planning. A lot of it's pre-planning. And whether that's relationships, with people always say it like relationships, it's true. It starts with that. But it's also about being prepared. And we're going to talk a little bit later about expect the unexpected, because if you get just sideswiped by behavior and you don't know how to respond to it, then you're going to end up reacting to it. And then I think the other piece is when all this is verbal, then active listening is important. We've got to actively listen and make sure we're picking apart those words that are coming out. If it's not verbal, then we've got to actively observe, and we've got to observe that body language that's coming out and look at those antecedents, like you said, because we've got to notice, we've got to be tacticians, like surgical with it, to find out what's going on so we can be there to assist when that child is ready to come back around.
Kiddos aren't going to wake up in the morning and be like, you know what, I am going to give that teacher the hardest time of his or her life today. There's not a teacher who comes into school saying, you know what, I'm going to listen to what the principal said today, and I'm going to absolutely do the opposite, because that's just what we need to do. We have to, as educators and really as good, kind people, always assume that there are good intentions that are being driven, are driving the behavior, or driving the action, or driving the attitude. And the more and more I think about this, as I look at my at-risk kids in particular, I think about the story that's behind their world. They're coming in with a history of possible conflict, a history of possible failure, and our job is to provide them with opportunity, and that opportunity requires real significant planning and forethought in terms of how to allow them entry. So you mentioned expect the unexpected, Paul. Talk a little bit about that in terms of that planning idea, and how do we bring a real humanistic skill set into providing kids what they really need in schools?
Oh man, you led me right down this road. So you're gonna make me show my age here. I'm thinking of this commercial. There's an old school deodorant called Dry Idea. All right, and what was the tag for Dry Idea? Never let them see you sweat. Never let them see you sweat. So that's what it's all about. Is listen, kids are gonna say the darndest things, just like the TV show, right? But we've got to be prepared not to react to that. Remember, that child that's in crisis, when you say to them, hey, you can't say that, or you can't do that, what are they going to do? They're going to say, I just did it. What are you going to do? So now you've painted yourself in a corner,
Yep.
And we never want that. We never want to paint ourselves in a corner, and we never want to paint our students in a corner. So what we want to do is we want to expect the unexpected. We want to be able to respond and say, I see that you're upset. Those messages have to be concise. I call it the rule of 6 words, okay? Because in that moment, most people that are at a heightened state are not going to hear your long message. They're going to hear 6 words. So if you say, I see that you're upset, or I'm here when you're ready, or I'm looking forward to you jumping back in, we missed you, that type of thing. Those are the types of messages that a person that's upset or angry or acting out need to hear. Like my man Corey Radish in the house tonight said, our reactions determine whether a spark goes out or combusts. So that next move isn't our move entirely, because there's another human being involved, but we have it's like chess. We have a huge part in play for what happens next.
One of the things I think about often as a middle school principal is giving tools to teachers to mitigate circumstances when kids begin to show these behaviors. It's very easy for a teacher to say, go down and see the principal, or go to guidance. Okay. You don't want to be part of the behavior, responding to the behaviors versus reacting to the behaviors. It's so hard. Teachers are taxed with getting their curriculum out, but we always talk about relationship and relationship building. And I can tell you firsthand, kids won't learn if they don't feel as though they're liked. Okay. It's just the way it goes, especially in middle school. I can tell you, I don't care what middle school we talk about, but arming teachers with ways to be able to mitigate these behaviors in the moments, it could be so instrumental. Let's talk a little bit about responding to the behaviors versus reacting to them.
So you said something really important there. You said that kids can't learn if they don't feel like. They also can't learn if they don't feel like they belong. So think about it. When you send a student to the principal's office, what message are you sending? You're sending that message of, he doesn't want me here, or she doesn't want me here, or he can't handle me, or she can't handle me. So think about that message that it sends. And then the bigger piece of that is students can't learn to their full potential unless you believe in them. So I always say that the power of belief is a competitive advantage. So when kids feel like, think about it for a second, fellas, think about somebody in your life that's believed in you unconditionally, no matter what, after failures, before successes, during good times and bad times. Think about somebody in your life that's believed in you and how that's empowered you to do great things, how that's led you to do great things, how that's led you to take big risks, and those are huge things right there, because let's face it, we're dealing with kids, no matter what age they are. They're 17 years old, 18 years old, special ed, they might be 21 years old. It might be a 5 or 6 year old, a 10-year-old, no matter what the age is, we're needed there for them because they're not adults yet. They're not fully formed as far as their strategies and their abilities to deal with things. So this is how we help them. This is how we give them the tools to succeed and put them in positions for success the way that they see success.
We had my wife and I went through a grad program at Springfield College back in 2000 or thereabouts, and the whole point was to get at and engage at-risk youth, to really prepare us to be able to provide adjustment counseling services as classroom educators. So we came out dual certified, with an education degree and a counseling degree. The idea was to meet the kids where they're at. And one of these educators who was in charge of us and was a great mentor, Mrs. Patty Cutler, said, always tell a kid if they've got snot on their face. It sounds kind of gross, but if you think about it, if you're willing to have a difficult conversation with a child about something that could potentially be very embarrassing to them in front of their peers, and you open the door to a trusting conversation with them, they are going to go the extra mile for you and with you. And that's really what I'm hearing you say, Paul, is, we want to respond to the behavior versus react. We want to be proactive and preventative in building relationship that's open and honest with kids. And Patty's words, as nasty as it is, you want to tell a kid they have snot on their face, really does ring true to building an open and honest relationship. As you sit down and you think about, the idea of behavior in the classroom, a teacher who's used to control, it's about me as a classroom teacher. It's not really about me. It's not about me personally. Can you talk about that idea of quit taking it personally and focus on the environment and how we really build that space that's safe?
Absolutely. Before we go there, I just want to go back for a second, because you talked about something with the message and having that difficult conversation. It's really important for us to make sure that we state the claim for what that conversation's about in the beginning of the conversation, not at the end. Because if a kid is acting out or upset, they're going to hear the first things you say and they might shut it down. So if you say something like, hey, this is going to be a difficult conversation, but I believe in you, or I'm having this conversation with you because I care about you, or I'm having this conversation because I know you want me to tell you this because we both think that you have greater days ahead. Imagine hearing that in the beginning and then going, wow, okay, instead of, hey, sit down, I got to talk to you because I'm really disappointed in you, or I'm really disappointed in what you did. So I think that piece is important. But the personal side of things, as far as taking behavior personally, I like the Q-tip strategy. I think the Q-tip strategy is huge. And as a behaviorist, Chris, I know you're shaking your head there. It's quit taking it personal. Quit taking it personal. And I keep a Q-tip in my desk to remember that, because sometimes you think it's about you, Yeah. And meanwhile, we're not on the set of General Hospital. Like, this isn't a drama. This isn't like, she's trying to sabotage my world. She's trying to take my job. He's trying to do this. It's not any of that. You know what I mean? So we've got to get over that part, and we got to put and it's a very human business. So that it's tough to say, put your personal feelings aside, because it is such an emotional business. It is such a human business. So we've got to say it's about us. It's about how we grow together, how we learn together. I haven't handled every behavioral situation perfectly. There's times I'm halfway through a situation and I'm like, man, I should have said that. Or man, I should have done this. Or maybe I should have just, you know what I mean? Like, the power of that is just, instead of trying to respond and trying to put your own narrative into it. Like, think about how many times with kids, they say or do something, and then we go, well, when I was your age, and they're like, man, like, how is that relevant to me? You walked to school uphill both ways. There was no social media. You were on MySpace. Like, they're not worried. I went all the way back. But think about it. Like, it's not relevant. So we've got to make sure that we don't get too personal about it and think that this kid's trying to ruin my lesson. This kid's trying to ruin, take the attention away from my teaching. We've got to get away from that and realize that there's somebody here that is trying to send us a message. If we can look to the root cause, we may find hurt. We may not find hurt. It may not be hurt. It might be discomfort. It might be confusion. It might be a lack of sense of belonging. So we can't look at it as any one thing. We just got to look into it, try to get to that root cause through active listening, building relationships, and patience. And if we can, it makes it easier to stop taking it personal and being able to service the person that you're trying to help.
Paul, one of the things that I see from my seat sometimes that I'm dealing with kids, I try not to ever over personalize the situation. And what I like to do is really, I do use the word disappointed frequently, but I use the word disappointment towards the behavior and not the individual. And the reason why I do that is because disappointment is temporary. And I always say that to kids, okay? Because if you let them know it's a temporary time period for reflection, generally speaking, it eases the flow of the conversation. Now, if you think about it for a second, what are some techniques to separate the behavior from the individual when we really stop and look at this? I know teachers don't have the time to sit down and do a complete session of psychological profiling and helping them get through the situation. So I'm talking more from guidance perspective, more from a leadership and administration. When you're helping a child navigate through something, what does it look like?
Wow, that's almost like a whole podcast in itself, right?
It is, yeah.
But I really think it boils down to a couple simple things. I think the first thing is delivery. Delivery is everything. We talked about that difficult conversation. We talked about that message that we're trying to send. And if we have a person that's escalated and we're delivering that message from an escalated perspective as well, then nobody's hearing anybody. You know what I mean? We're saying things that we're probably going to regret later on. The students getting more escalated. So delivery is key. So, but let's break that down even further, because we can't always assume that behavior comes from escalated individuals. Sometimes behavior, like we talked about, can be nonverbal. Maybe it's a student that's not engaged. Maybe it's a student that feels like they don't belong, so they're non-participatory, things of that nature. So I think the language that we use is very important, like steeping the language in belief and steeping the language in coming from a place of care is so important, as opposed to, you're not doing your work, or, you can do better. Those things are really, really tough to receive. This is a great story. It's a quick one. So I had a teacher one time say to a student, "Don't take the lazy way out." And this was a student who was generally well behaved, got good grades, and maybe didn't perform to their best ability on that assignment. And the student responded by cursing at the teacher and walked out of the room. And the teacher was blown away. So as time went by, kid goes to the counselor, kid's in tears. And the kid said, like, this blew me. I'll never forget this story. The kid said, "I don't know what happened. It's not me. I would never curse at a teacher. But my mom just got released from prison, and she always used to call me lazy." And I was like, wow. So this teacher who was using sarcasm, which is another thing sometimes that we do when we're working with students, that tried to use sarcasm there to connect with a kid, it was an incomplete pass. And not only was it incomplete, but it was intercepted and returned the other way, because this kid was devastated because it brought back trauma in this kid's life from earlier years.
Yeah, you bring up a good point in terms of the application of trauma-informed practices. We're not going to get into that because we'll be here for 4 days talking straight. But the idea that every child's story, every person's story is going to influence them and how they react and respond is absolutely key to having an effective classroom environment that meets their needs. Having been a part of a private school called, I brought this up a couple of weeks ago, Dean, Eagle Hill School. It's a school for learning disabled students. We had taken the disabled and put dis in parentheses. And our job as educators was to look at their learning ability, their social ability, their emotional ability, their mental health ability, and take the dis out of it, because there is a trick to identifying what everybody is capable of. And that's focusing on what they're capable of achieving through their strengths. And I think you really nailed it there, Paul, as you're talking about, identifying the need for kids to connect to their history and to be able to present information to them in a way that is meaningful to their heart and then maybe to their mind. Hit the heart first. And I think that's the entry. that we're talking about here.
So Paul, how can we all become better at this? It doesn't matter who you are in a school building. You could be a custodian, you could be a teacher, you can be a lunch lady, you could be a principal, an assistant principal, a counselor, a nurse. How do we take the steps to understand that a children's mental health and well-being far should supersede any learning that takes place?
I think if you come from I know that if you come from a place of care, that it's always going to be received in a better way. I think we've also got to be able to resist the urge to label. You know, I remember the last classroom that I taught in before I became a dean. They said, "Hey, you're going to be in charge of the BD program." So I knew what that was because I'd done a whole bunch of that before. And I had a kid that came up in early September, and he said, "Hey, Mr. I got a question for you." He goes, "Somebody told me that I'm in the BD class. What does that mean?" So I said, "Oof, that's a tough conversation to have, right?" So I said, "Well, what does it mean to you?" And he said, "I'm not sure. That's why I'm asking you." And I said, "Well, this is a classroom, and you got to be honest to a degree." I said, "This is a classroom that deals with behaviors. You know, it deals with helping students with behaviors when they've struggled in the traditional environment." He goes, "All right, I get what the B stands for." He goes, "What does the D stand for?" Whew, the conversation it started to get a little hot in the kitchen. You know what I mean? So I said, "You know what?" I said, "If we're talking scientifically," I said, "you know, theoretically, we're talking about behavioral disabilities." And he goes, "Who's disabled?" He goes, "I'm not disabled." He goes, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Mr. O," he goes, "we got to change the name of this class." And I said, I'm down. I'm down for that. I said, "I'll tell you what, why don't we both go home and sleep on it? You know, we'll let the rest of the class know," because the conversation was open, you know, pretty open. So let the rest of the class know, and we'll come up with something that we really like. So same kid comes back tomorrow, and he goes, "You know, I like the initials BD, but I want to use them differently." And I was like, "Oh boy." You know, I'm like, you know, I can think of some words that start with B and D that make me uncomfortable. And he said, "This is what I want to call our class if everybody agrees with it." And I said, "What do you got?" And he goes, "I want to call it the best damn class." So, wow. I said, "Listen, that's what we will be known as, the best damn class, and we're going to shock the world. So get ready."
Well, inclusivity within learning communities is everything in every school. Everybody should feel part of it. If they don't feel part of it, then we've done something wrong from the top down. Again, every child that steps through our doors better feel wanted, better feel respected, and better feel as though they can be who they are in order to get to where they need to be. So, I mean, that's super cool. So innovative practices, this is kind of off script a little bit. So from your perspective and looking at your background, Paul, I mean, where do you see this all going? Schools have changed. They really have. We have a real focus on social emotional learning. Okay, that has really taken a real front seat over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Where are we going with all this?
I think, again, I believe one of the biggest mistakes that we're making is trying to make social emotional learning be a part of our day and fit in somewhere. And that's a mistake because it needs to be part of everything that we do. You know, so you can start with a morning meeting. You could start with an end of the day, you know, wrap up and some kind of community piece. Like those are all good steps, but we've got to find a way to turn social emotional learning and the academic expectations and put them together side by side and make sure that we're learning lessons from both so that we can become just better people.
Mm-hmm. I think the better people idea is exactly what this world needs right now. You know, we're in a 50-50 world. Everything's divisive. Everything is he versus him and her versus she. And we have to understand that everyone is in this ultimately for the same reason. And when we sit down and look at schools, you know, we're in a district, Dean, that prides itself upon civility and respect, and that we want to treat others with kindness and respect. We also want one another to seek help for others, and we want kids to be good self-advocates for their own needs. And in order to do that, we have to merge social emotional with academic content and make sure that it's being presented in a way that's tight and that it's being delivered in a caring way. We still have to hold the hammer above kids. We still have to continue to move forward, but we don't have to focus on just the grade. We don't have to focus on just the discipline. We have to focus on what you just said, Paul, the conversation to move kids and people forward in a positive way. I love how you summarize that.
That's a PD in all itself, though. You want to start teaching teachers on how to embed that within curriculum. Woo! It's, they got a hard enough job as it is right now, but again, that's an ongoing, that's a theme-based, thematic-based building as far as I'm concerned. You know what? Each year, how do you embed that within your reading that you're doing? How do you embed that into, your monthly themes? Those things become ever present and great opportunities for this.
Yeah. No doubt. And I got to give a shout out to my principal, Holly Nemec. We actually did that session at the New Jersey Equity Symposium, the first ever one when we were allowed to get together with people, and our district, Lacey Township, sponsored us, had us go out and do this, how to make sure that you can implement social emotional learning into daily academic lessons. And we only had an hour with the people that we had, and conversation was flying, opportunities were flying, but it was just an hour. And I hope when we get a chance to get back together with people again, that we can get some more time to continue those conversations.
I hate to rob from that a little bit, though. Can you just give us a couple of highlights of what that may have looked like? And I'm going to stand back, man, because I think this is the home run right here.
Yep. It was powerful. So what happens a lot of times with professional development is it's given in one size fits all, right? It's like theoretical. You should do this, you could do that, whatever the case may be. So people are sitting there and they're going, well, this might work for me, but these three things don't work for me. So what Holly and I did, my principal, is we made sure that we implemented and blended opportunities for social emotional learning in every single subject area. But then we doubled down and we said, you know what, let's not just do this from the elementary perspective. Let's do it from the elementary, the middle to the high. So we had specific examples where we of course, we only had the hour. So we had to give some takeaway stuff to take home, which everybody commented on and felt like was very useful. But, now we could say, hey, you're the gym teacher and you're thinking, how could you tie in social emotional? Here's how. You're the music teacher, you're the science, or maybe you're the math teacher. It's like, well, social emotional is about holding hands and singing songs and talking nice to each other. And listen, social emotional has some tie-ins about how we treat people and dealing from a place of care and respect, but it's so much more than that. When we're able to take those principles and concepts and make them transferable in every subject area at every level, now we're talking.
Paul, those words are so powerful. I sit on a couple of committees. I'm a president of an officiating organization, and I even see how adults speak to adults. If we could take what we learn from a middle level, elementary level, and put it into a professional meeting, you get places. There's integrity. You got to understand people's feelings associated with things. Nobody wants to get beaten over the head and say they've done something wrong. Most people make choices. There are direct consequences. How you handle that and how you lay that out makes a difference in the world about the humanistic factor of having those tough conversations. So again, this is a paradigm throughout life, not only at the middle school level. So great stuff.
Yeah, it really is. It's super special. We sit down and we talk about the idea of how do we make a better society and a better system? How do we allow kids to achieve their potential and realize their own success? This is where it's at, because kids, they're going to find their niche. But ultimately, what we want them to do is be successful with their niche. If they're going to be a mechanic, they have to know how to relate to their customer. If they're going to be an executive, they have to relate to their divisions that they're in charge of. If they're going to be an educator, they got to relate to the kids at the grade level that they're teaching. Whatever it is that we're looking to do, we have to teach and instill positive beliefs in their communication skills and their relationship skills. So that way they really understand what makes things tick. And tonight was a really special show tonight. Paul, I'm really fired up that we were able to have you in.
Listen, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And just one last thing I'll add on, is that we've got to realize that kids, sometimes they have the answers.
Yeah.
I think we look past them when we go like,
right.
I'm the professional, I'm the degree professional, I'm the adult. I've been there, I've done that. I talk to a lot of the people that are in this chat. I talk to daily, and Corey's one of them. Corey told a story about his cafeteria and where there was a lot of behavioral issues in his cafeteria. And he said that it stemmed from kids getting up and throwing their garbage away, and all the garbage cans were located in the same spot. So there became like a cluster of traffic in that spot. And then Corey started to talk about how, he put some heads together to figure it out. And it was a student that came up with the idea of, hey, this is what we see, and we need to change that. Can we move the garbage cans around? And the only reason the garbage cans were in that place was because that's the way they've always done it. It was status quo stuff. And we got to get past that status quo and include everyone's voice at the table if we're looking forward to making lives better for everybody.
Well,
I love the idea of student voice. Super powerful.
Well, we've talked a lot about reimagining schools, and COVID's given us this opportunity to reimagine and redefine. And Chris, you've gone back multiple times. We're going all the way back to one of our past guests. We talk about Walt Disney and what they do every year. They redesign their product. Okay. Why can't we do that in education? Why can't we make it better? Why can't we really think about what works and where is it going to take us next? What's the next 5 years going to look like for us? That's really exciting. I mean, I'm closer to retirement than probably both of you two, but at the end of the day, I can't wait to see what, the next couple of years are going to hold for us. I mean, schools need to be that place where kids feel safe and they feel as though it's their second home. And if you don't make that happen, again, I mean, I think the walls just begin to crumble, and that's not good. And that's not where we want to be ever.
No, I agree. As we sit down and think about, a barometer for a successful society and a successful experience, it's about learning how to engage with others and apply those academic lessons, whether they're actual academic or not. But by lessons, I mean academic lessons. I mean your experiences, and they have to be meaningful to you and move forward. But hey, Dean, I'm sitting here looking at Paul. I'm looking at Sunday night on Thanksgiving week, and I'm thinking it might be time to take us home, man.
All right. Well, listen, Paul, thank you so much. Your words of wisdom tonight are going to be resonating for a while within me. I'm looking at my own social emotional team, my student support team, looking at ways always that we can become better. And whenever we can reach out with somebody like you and a lot of our other guests on Unlock the Middle, we just become better for it. So on behalf of Mr. O'Neill, Principal Starcheski, we want to thank all of you for watching us tonight. And again, all of our comments on the side, thank you very much for putting them in. We hope you be well, enjoy your holidays, and we look forward to Tuesday night. We're going to have another surprise show coming your way. So until then, be well, be safe, and take care.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.